already been talking to people for about 3 hours, so carry on.
Or you can talk to me for another 45
Yeah,
minutes.
well, this is more fun.
And then I'll cut you off.
Yeah, exactly. Done on the top of the hour.
Hello and welcome to eCommerce Matters, brought to you by BlackCurve. We help e-commerce businesses make pricing decisions. I'm Philip Huthwaite, the founder of BlackCurve, and I'm joined as ever by Product Director, Dr. Rob Horton. Today's title is, Can AI be used in pricing? We hope it's a controversial one because AI, can anyone actually describe what it is? We'll find out in the next 45 minutes. Rob, over to you. Discuss. Go.
Yeah. This is one of those where no matter what position you take, you're going to pick a fight with someone. So whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether you can, whether you can't. And I think it's also one of those things where it's possible to believe about three conflicting beliefs at once.
And also the funny thing is if you put the term artificial intelligence into Google, even on the first sheet, the first set of results, every single one sort of slightly describes it differently. So hey, let's go a few rounds today. Let's try and do our view, and then the people can comment. The people can tell us whether we're on the right track, the wrong track. We're halfway there. But before we do that, what prop have you brought, Rob, to describe today's podcast, which is, can AI be used in pricing?
So mine is quite nerdy.
We like nerdy. That's fine.
I brought, because I'm reading it at the minute, actually, again, I really like it. It's Foundation, which I'm happily covering, by Isaac Asimov, who is credited with kind of inspiring a lot of the kind of theory around AI and robotics and all the rest of it. So iRobot was him, the laws of robotics and all of that. So that's my prop. So
did you decide to start reading this because when we had the catch-up chat, I said you needed to get a prop, or were you actually already,
No, it was coincidental. I actually, I haven't read it for a couple of years, and it's one of my favourite books. And I'm back home in Devon. I saw it on the bookshelf, and then I thought, I can use that as a prop.
It doubles up, multi-purpose. Not only is it
the other
fun
thing I was going to do was bring my laptop with a video game I'm playing currently, but I thought that pointing that at a screen.
I was thinking of actually showing my my phone with the facial recognition piece. Yeah. That actually I've recently sort of done a facial recognition now of me in a mask, because it was annoying me that when you're out and about it couldn't recognize you, so you can just add yourself as a new person and it recognizes you because you've got a mask.
That's really smart.
Well, that's why they're paying me the big bucks, Rob.
That's on the level of when I realised I could use the fingerprints on my left hand and my right hand.
Whoa! And you've got 5 on each hand as well.
Yeah. Well, I only need the indexes on my phone, but that took me longer than I would like to admit.
How long did your doctorate take you to get?
Less time than it took me to work that out.
Right, I'll stop beating you up. Right, so I have, again, running theme, committed theft. Here we go. But I'll tell you why. So I have got a car. It's my son's sort of Playmobil car. But the reason I've got that is because I've also recently got a new car. So I've recently got a new Volvo, and I had a Volvo previously. I know, I'm rock and roll. Lamborghinis are overrated. It's all about Volvos. And in the new car, I have got lane sensors that scared the crap out of me. So I was flicking through, when you get a new thing, you flick through all of the menus and you go, oh, what's that? It was called, I think it's called driving assist or something, lane sensor technology. And I was like, cool, okay, I'll tick that on. And we were out the weekend driving in the countryside. In the countryside, sometimes the lane sizes that are sort of varied, and there was lots of bends, and I clipped the apex because I'm a race driver as well, and my alternative ego.
Yeah,
But no, I clipped the
sure.
apex, and it suddenly went zzz, and literally pulled me back into. It kind of gives you a light nudge back into the lane, and that was, that's my symbol for artificial intelligence. That it's all the cameras are constantly doing their thing. It's checking whether or not you're where you should be, your position should be, and it's making an artificial decision to realign you. And the reason why this is equally important is because it also tees in with the title of should it be used, because I actually found that scared the shit out of me, and I've subsequently turned it off because
I think you're not supposed to use it in country lanes, isn't that?
no, but it's on like all the time. Like you can either have it on or off, so there's no like
really?
Yeah, there's no setting. I mean, feel free to correct me. I might be breaking the highway code here, but it's this default
Philip,
setting.
You're talking to someone with a 2010 VW Polo. I've got no idea.
So there we go. So that's my prop.
I thought that was going to be one of those robot tractors they have now for the big farms in Australia and America.
Well, we can always just cut out what I just said. So I have brought a new prop. It is a tractor, and it's for robotic. It works on so many levels. Again. So many levels. That poor boy George. He always gets associated with tractors, doesn't he? Right. Enough on that. Right.
What are you talking about?
So, I think let's start by trying to define AI, because I think this is probably where a lot of the bone of contention lies, right? I think so many people have different opinions on what actually is AI and what isn't. So, Rob, from your point of view, what is artificial intelligence?
Yeah, so I don't have I wouldn't say I go with a very academic definition, in that for me in business, anything where you're using a computer to automate a task really is a form of AI. There's no one ever said how intelligent it has to be, right? I mean, I guess is the way I'd phrase it. So if you're managing to take a human out of the loop, and that could be robotics, that could be code, software, some kind of automated, repeatable thing, that for me is a form of AI. The question of how intelligent is when you get into how almost much freedom that AI has to make a decision. Is it just repeating a process over again? Can it react to its environment? Or can it predict what's going to happen in its environment? I guess are the kind of stages. I think for a lot of people, whether you class the kind of repeated automation versus being able to react, I think for a lot of people it's when it can react that it becomes AI. But I just kind of bucket it all together because for me it makes no odds if I'm completely.
Well, I mean, I'm trying not to get too philosophical here, but is the definition of intelligence something that can learn? Because I mean, I suppose if you have initially programmed, a computer algorithm to do something, just as much as you need to teach a human being how to do something, or you have to impart wisdom for them to learn, which bit is self-learning versus kind of a human construct.
There's two things there. There's kind of unsupervised, and you've jumped off like we haven't even got to that yet. That's right down the deep end. So there's supervised and unsupervised, right? And the supervised is where you train in. It's unsupervised where you leave it alone and it kind of trains itself. For me, that is like in machine learning is a subset of AI, but AI is much broader than that. And I think that's often a common conflation when people talk about AI and ML kind of interchangeably, and they're not really for me. It's more of like a toolbox, if anything. And then like within that, you have ML, within that, you have robotics, within that, you have automation, within that, and you'll use different bits in different parts, but it's all kind of using computers to do stuff, to be a bit West Country about it. But like anything where you're using a computer to perform an automated task, really, I think whether it can learn or not is like a nuance within it for me.
So am I right in thinking it's, it can be as simple as an automated, repeatable task, minimal intelligence, and that you can apply the AI banner to it?
Yeah, and someone will pick a fight with you about it. But I
you want some, Rob? I disagree wholly with that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, this is it, because it's like, I mean, literal books have been written about where you draw the line and what counts for machine intelligence. And are we in Turing test territory? Are we talking that extreme, or like as in? I think, to be quite frank, wherever you draw the initial line, someone's going to pick a fight with it. But for me, yeah, if you're using a computer to do something, it's probably an AI of some sort. Like, all right, so a good example actually is in a computer game, you would play against the quote unquote AI, right? And those traditionally haven't been learning at all. They just they react to the environment. It's just that they can react so much quicker than you. That's how they get the competitive edge. And that's what I mean about, like, that's often when people start to talk about AI in the reactive sense. So rather than just being a repeatable task, in general, it's that bit. Yeah.
Okay. And is it worth kind of touching on a bit? If you mentioned the ML word, machine learning, is it worth having a go at defining this subset of AI?
Well, yeah, ML is what it says, really. This is when the machine is, it's going to sound really trite, but when the machine is in some sense learning, and what that means is that you have an initial kind of setup which you can then train, or that will train itself to react differently next time. So if it's seen something and can understand it and will know the outcome, it will know that outcome next time. It'll be able to predict it, right? So good example, if I'm throwing a ball against the wall, right, in the same way, and it bounces the same way each time, the first time you throw it, the machine will have an equal probability of the ball going everywhere. And then as you throw it more and more times, and it will build up that distribution of where it expects the ball to go, and give you the probability of where it will end up. And it's worth saying that ML is well, like the world, actually, it's a deeper question for another thing, is probabilistic by and large. It's about the likelihood of things happening, not whether something will happen or not. And that, I think, will become important later on when we talk about it specifically with regard to pricing. But yeah, I mean, it's when you're, in effect, the machine is learning, or the machine is building up knowledge about its world in order to alter a prediction it will make in the future.
So I'm going to throw in a pricing example now to try and help this, the differentiation, and just to make sure we get it kind of crystal clear, at least in this vacuum of two, right, between the two of us. So let's say I have a data set about the weather, right, and where I'm making my pricing decisions, I configure a rule set which says when it's raining, I want the system to increase the price of umbrellas. Okay, right. So that's my one example. The second example is I've fed a training data set to an algorithm, and that itself identifies that, hang on a minute, the sales of umbrellas go up when it's raining. I think it might be a good idea to increase the price of umbrellas when it rains. So are both those examples artificial intelligence?
Oh, God.
I didn't say this was going to be easy today. You know, I hope you had your
Right, so the
Weetabix this
first one
morning.
is easy. The first one is not ML, it's AI, because you basically you're configuring a rule set, but that rule set can't adapt. So the rule set is just saying if it rains, increase price. The second one could be any of them in terms of how it was specified. And there's a question about which techniques you classify as ML or not.
So if you told it
So-
specifically to go and look at weather data, that might not be ML. Whereas if it had identified,
is linear regression ML, right? So if you do, or is correlation ML? So if what you were saying there is effectively building up an association or correlation between umbrella sales and rain, and then you're basically saying you're getting to this. How do you implement that, right? Are you back at your rule set again, and then really you've just built out a fancy way of testing your initial or proving your initial hypothesis, and then you implement it. Where it becomes ML is when you start having a range of, well, you could have a one feature model, which is it's raining, or it's likely. It's not it's raining. It is likely to rain. So the optimal thing for me to do is to put. You can hear my brain whirring, can't you? The optimal thing for me to do is raise prices on umbrellas, right? This is getting more MLE in the kind of, we have an 80% chance of rain, therefore the expected value of therefore I expect volume of umbrellas to go up by X amount, therefore by increasing the price I get an EV of however much versus not changing the price. I also calculate the fact that it's unlikely that an increase in price will drop volume enough to counteract that, blah, 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 blah. And depending on how deep you go, you reach the point where you can't actually unpick the pattern, because the way I'm talking about this is actually almost wrong for ML, because you reach the point where you're saying, well, we've stuck a load of features in, and features are like the weather, time of year, whether I'm wearing blue, green, or orange today, who knows? And it builds up a distribution, and the distribution says to put the price up or no. And that's where you get into this kind of really interesting thing around explainability and the usefulness of that. Because I mean, maybe we want to talk about this later, but while we're here, I think it's worth saying, it's like, if I'm a business owner, I want to understand why a pricing decision was made, like, by and large. I often don't when it's working, but there's always a bias for these things. I often don't when it's working, but really do when it's not. And because it's probability based, it's not going to be right all the time. It's going to be right on average, in theory, if it's trained correctly. But if you get into the real deep neural netty stuff, it's actually, you can't dig back out of it, because the way that these things are built up, the layers of functions, it's really hard to see which parameters affect what. Whereas if I do a standard linear regression, I calculate my weights, it says, well, my biggest factor is the weather, my second biggest factor is time of year, because if it's oh god, I'm in winter, it's going to rain all the time, versus, well, that was weird for summer, etc., etc., etc. Those weights are valid, and because each variable is treated as independent, you can say, well, this is most important, then this and this and this. You can't do that with a lot of machine learning techniques, which makes them difficult in a business scenario where explainability to key stakeholders is a key part of doing business and interacting in the world, right?
I mean, we will look at this in more detail probably at the back end of this chat, but that's certainly that you're moving into, well, the pros of it is that sometimes artificial intelligence can help you get to the answer quicker, okay, but you might not be able to.
No,
Some
more
say some, well,
accurate,
so, okay,
more
so,
accurately.
well, I was going to say,
would.
I was going to say it from a point of view of that more often than not, when you're building up your decision mechanisms, a human being might go to a stance where they remove all the variables and they add one variable in at a time to assess the impact. Whereas something that's automated can typically do that a hell of a lot quicker. And okay, might not actually get to the right answer.
I think you're underestimating how long some of these things take to train. In the but yeah, sure, why not? But certainly, I don't. You got an interesting comparison there, Philip. Actually, because it's, are you comparing it to other AI techniques, or are you comparing it to a human? And I'd kind of jumped into the AI techniques thing. Whereas, yeah, I mean, the big advantage for, we've spoken about this before, all this stuff is automation and scale first and foremost. And then when you talk about speed, you're right, because you could rapidly reach the point where it's going to take a human and the age of the universe to make the number of choices.
So let's bring it back to the pricing topic. So can AI be used in pricing? And I feel that we've rapidly gone straight to the deep end. So let's swim to the shallow end, shall we? To bring it back a bit. How, from your point of view, do you see the stages of companies that look to use AI in pricing? Where do they typically start?
Yeah, so we've spoken about this before, but really for me, the first stage is automation. And then it's kind of rules-based pricing, whatever those rules might be. They could be cost plus, they could be competitive matching, they could be incredibly sophisticated. And then you've got predictive and quote unquote classical, for want of a better phrase, which is like price elasticity, which is just linear regression. And then you can go off the deep end and go into like your ML techniques or more advanced predictive techniques. And it's worth saying that, like, I wouldn't write off ML off the bat, because there are some really nice features of the functional forms used. Sorry, this is super technical, but
you've gone back in the deep end again.
no, but it's the sigmoid functions often used in machine learning techniques, which look like this, actually look very similar to, I mean, you'll recognize them as demand curves. So it's not, this is not science, but it's not, it's not like you're forcing a functional form onto a data set that doesn't have that inherent behavior in it. So really, if you're stepping through it, you should worry about automation. Then you should worry about being reactive to your environment with pricing rules. Then you can start thinking about being predictive. And then you can worry about being more and more predictive. I would say that I do think there is quite a strong diminishing returns curve along that. Because the question you have to ask yourself mathematically is, how optimal or how accurate do I need to price? And if you're in like the pounds to pence category and not into the like stock market levels of arbitrage, you're going to need a lot less sophistication in terms of algorithms and overheads than you would if you're trying to, I don't know, efficiently price futures contract so that you can make like cents on the dollar and sell them at whatever, right? So I do think for most ecom people, if you get to the rules-based bit and go no further, you're probably fine. And that's what, honestly, if I was running a business, that's about where I get to. I'd have some cleverer rules, like it wouldn't just be match my competitors, but and I'd use bits and pieces of price elasticity theory, but as we've spoken about before, and we'll go into a bit, there are issues with trying to do this predictive stuff that often, certainly smaller merchants, the barriers, they're just kind of insurmountable.
So let's hold that thought for a second. So let's just refresh for a moment. So if I'm hearing this correctly, how can AI be used in pricing? I think it's in the early stages. It is very much from a reactive standpoint that a rule or an algorithm can be programmed to automatically go through a series of steps. Yeah. So that those series of steps, and actually even before this, so you as an e-commerce company may be collecting competitor data or maybe purchasing competitor data from a third party.
I go even further back. You could just automatically pass cost prices on, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's actually, if you're a drop shipper, for example, and you're and you're just simply wanting to do a calculation on your cost prices and make sure that you're always selling within a certain margin and you're achieving that, then that is, artificial intelligence. It's we might be told off for saying that, but that's some level of automation.
Like I said, we never said how intelligent it is.
And then from a competitor data point of view, if I continue on that element, the supplier will have extracted competitor data, and they'll be doing, we do it ourselves. We'll be doing various filtering on it to cleanse it to make sure it's correct, and that is a repeatable, automated process that is trying to get the data set in a robust method, check for crap data, check for incorrect collections, check for dodgy matches, and so forth, and then present that to the user as simple insights. You might not necessarily be subsequently making any decisions off the back of it, but you're certainly using it, and that is one of the earlier stages of how AI can be used in pricing.
Yeah, and I'd say, just like to be a bit more technical around it, that this is all rules-based AI, right? So I've often called it 1970s versus 1980s AI, but like what this for me is the kind of thing is like poker bots or AI in video games traditionally, where they react to data points and then have heuristics. I mean, for want of a better term, just rules that say, if in these conditions do this, in these conditions do that. And I personally think for most cases that's really good, because, well, I mean, look at last year. How predictive are you going to be, right? Like,
what's happened? I don't know. What are you referring to?
Well,
but I mean that in itself leads to what I think you were going to go on to, kind of from a data integrity point of view. The reason that AI, especially from a pricing point of view, and sorry, I'll start again. The reason that rules-based AI is so valuable and useful from a pricing point of view is because more often than not, the data used to make the pricing decisions is not good enough or doesn't have enough data points in which to build a robust, fully all singing, all dancing, ML, WizKid, which however way you want to describe it, thing that goes off and you just literally turn it on and it does its magic, right? You need, especially if you haven't changed prices historically enough, okay, you haven't got a chance in hell, and we've spoken about it on multiple podcasts in the past. You haven't got a chance in hell of using price elasticity calculations in your pricing decisions to sort of predictive rules, but you can use rule sets in which to say, right, if my sales history is this, I don't know, nudge the price a bit, see what happens. If the sales are okay, keep nudging. And then if you let that run long enough, you've used your rule set to build up enough data sets to then potentially look to do something more advanced down the line.
There's a really easy way of thinking about this from my perspective, and it's like, has it seen it in the data, right? And if it hasn't happened in the past, if it's not within like a small window of extrapolation, like, okay, it's linear or in a linear or quadratic region, so it's either like a straight line or like that, you're really going to struggle, because you're going to hit a discontinuity, or you're going to hit a case where something blows up, and real markets are non-linear and do blow up, and your predictive models aren't going to be able to predict it because I've seen it. What's worse, actually, this is, anyone who's worked in a city will know this, is that every disaster is different. So if you train through a disaster, like the financial crisis was the classic, it will start predicting every other disaster will behave like that. And disasters are chaotic by and large. So it's really unlikely that they are for exactly the same way. So you get an algorithm that reacts to a new disaster or a new phase change, or however you want to phrase it, or in the same way as the old one, but it's not the same. And so you run the risk of going even wildly wrong. I mean, if you talk to most people who are doing, so we don't. It's probably worth saying that we don't price for neural nets or any of that stuff. We're both quite strong proponents of like rules based or heuristic approaches, mostly because of the market we work in, as you mentioned, because of the data stuff. But everyone's just having to retrain everything because the data's blown up, because the last 9 months now are wildly different. The problems have completely flipped. Like the issues have become supply side, not conversion or sales side. So any algorithm. So basically, the nature of the market has changed, which means that any previous data actually, quite frankly, is irrelevant because the state of the market is so different. Whereas if you do a rules-based approach, and you can do either, and there are pros and cons of both, right? But if you do a rules-based approach, because it's reactive, as long as you've thought about it, put the cases in, you can react to it. Now, it may not be as good in the far limit of like where you can get to instead of upside, but it's certainly, I would say, safer, more understandable, and easier to fix.
Yeah, and I mean, you've gone to kind of what happens in a chaos, right? I depend who you talk to this year. Is there's been winners and losers, and out of chaos, winners occur.
No, what I actually said is it's chaotic, which means that a small change makes a massive difference.
So I was going to look at it from I was just going to look at it from the point of view of actually normal, mundane, day-to-day things, right? So, let's say that why do you not cross a road without looking? At what point were you told as a child? Who invariably told you to look right, look left, look right again? I probably got those the wrong way around. Before you cross a road.
Green giant.
Yeah. It's invariably your mum, your dad, or whoever was looking after you when you were first around, right? Somebody has told you that. And I'm looking at it from the point of view of you've got to also make sure that your automated engine has got the right safeguards for it to be used properly. You've got to make sure that that you've gone in and put your minimum price in, you've put your retail recommended price in, because if you don't, this wasn't meant to turn into pros and cons of AI, but this is where sometimes AI certainly gets into difficulty, because it doesn't have those parameters, and you start selling below cost price because you haven't updated your cost prices correctly. Then you can get into a whole world of gamut of like, are you matching the right competitors automatically, and you're race to the bottom, and
and you're so basically if you work in the real world, your clients will be pissed off. It's worth saying though that like if you look at what I would call like the stellar examples of ML out there, like your AlphaGos, like people beating chess with grandmasters at chess and people at StarCraft and Dota and stuff. There's a boatload of heuristics in that too, right? So, then this is what I meant. Like it's a combination of techniques, and I'd be really wary of like, from a business perspective, like purists who are trying to kind of force one way of solving a problem into how you should do your pricing, because like we've alluded to before, your business will have a level of sophistication, and that doesn't necessarily mean from a business perspective, but it does mean from a data perspective, from an infrastructure perspective, from a responsiveness perspective. Your marketplace will have a reaction rate or a frequency at which it operates, and it may be that it's changing to quickly for a predictive technique to work, so you have to be reactive, or it could be completely stable, in which case lovely linear models may even work well. Like, so you just don't know really until you, but this is where, if I come back to what I said earlier, if you're quite a smaller business and you don't have the economies of scale, there's no point. Like, the ROI on investing in this kind of stuff is minimal. Like, because you can't, because of how long it takes to chew and learn and develop, and you might win in the end, but that money would have been better spent on like advertising or like stock selection or product selection, or I don't know, another like back-end infrastructure. Like, there's a whole host of kind of other priorities for me before ML, which is weird for data scientists to say, and I often get in trouble for saying it.
Yeah, but even the big companies, the big behemoths in their various sectors, right? A lot of them are still doing very basic, pricing decisions. We know we work with a number of them. We've met a number of them as well. And so, and actually, the icing on the cake is for them only getting a few stages forward of doing more advanced rules-based pricing decisions than, and by the way, that can be you yourself configuring the rule, as in the retailer, or alternatively it can be working with a provider who has seen how to set up and manage pricing from across multiple sectors or your sectors in other case studies, right? So it's not just simply create a step-by-step list and hope for the best. You are still doing your research, you are still working with experts, you are still fine-tuning and seeing, right, today I'm going to set this rule up and see what happens and test and learn, right? But that happens in any field. Okay. So the last bit that I wanted to talk about, unless you wanted to also go and talk about, add extra things, that is allowed, Rob, don't worry, is you mentioned about explainability, and this is a big thing for us, and certainly in the early days of BlackCurve, I think we'll put our hands up and say this was something which we spent a lot of time in the early days to try and get right. As in, you make we very much didn't want to be perceived as a black box that you put a load of data in and out spits a price, and you go scratch your head saying why did it recommend that? Because fundamentally you've got to trust these machines, these automated bots to do it. So from your point of view, is explainability important? I suppose you better agree with me now, haven't you?
So I think even though we focused on it, we still massively underestimated how important it was. Actually, if I were to give my review of it, I think we dramatically underestimated the level of understanding and ability to dig in that people would want. Because you forget that your pricing tells you about your marketplace, right? It tells you about everything in your business. It tells you about what your competitors are doing, about where your stock levels are, where your stock levels should be. So the more opaque you make that, unless like the harder and harder it is for people to use that insight elsewhere. And so, yeah, I think explainability and pricing is probably actually the most important part of it, really, from a human perspective. Now, that may not be true if you're running like a fully robotic business where you can kind of just plug it. Say you have like a dream drop shipping model, and it's just like a magic money tree that sources everything and it all speaks to each other. But if there's any human interaction in your business at all, I think explainability of any algorithm is really important, whether that's stock selection, advertising, pricing decisions. But because of I would say, commercial sensitivity of pricing, I think it's especially important, really, like, because I've got to turn around to you, right, as CEO, why is this product's priced this way? Algorithm says so. Okay, but can we control that? Why is it doing this? Do we know why it's doing that? It's interesting that it's saying to go this way, and all our insight into the market is telling us it's going the other way? Do you know if it's a bug? Do you know if it's real? Algorithm says so, right? Like, and that's where it becomes problematic, where if you have a fantastically fully working AI, this is what I was joking about at the beginning, when things working, people don't care, but when things aren't working, they really do care. And when things aren't working, which they generally don't, in business situations where your data is poor or bad quality, or there's not enough of it, or a whole list of things, right, that mean that the decision coming out the engine could be wrong or inaccurate. And if you can't understand that causal link, and the answer is, well, in a full ML one, it's like your model doesn't work, and you can try and retrain the model with more accuracy, and that's about the only option you have. And at that point, I don't like that, because you're getting into like, I think, soothsaying, like reading the entrails territory, where like we used to call it parameter fiddling in a kind of disparaging way, but you're just kind of trying to change the mixture of things you put in the bowl to come up with the right cake at the other end. There's no science in it, really. So yeah, I think that explainability piece is important. I think actually that's certainly through the sales cycle is often what we see as people caring most about. Yeah.
I mean, one of the interesting examples, I'll probably find once I've explained it hasn't got relevance to this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Is and I'm gonna go back to fishing again, because I know it's one of your loves. I wouldn't say first love. I don't know how far down is it on the list.
It's quite high up.
Quite high up. Okay, we'll go third. We'll go third after his other half and his parents, maybe. So,
where I'm living at the minute. And,
is one of our customers. They're using our competitor data rules, and they're also using our sales history rules, right? And the sales history rules have been working really well for them, as in where we've identified that the sale through has been higher, we've kept nudging the price up and up. And if you look at it from a pure explainability point of view, you'd say, well, hang on a minute, the sales are going up, so this is the reason that they're making a lot more money. And when we dug into it, it transpired that the reason that actually this particular sales rule and these particular products are doing really well is because their competitors weren't actually updating their Google product feed because they run out of stock. Okay, and so this is where having complete visibility of lots of different data sets and not necessarily always taking, on face value what the machine's telling you is important. And that's why I think for me it's, AI is really powerful as an automation technique, okay, but I think I think we're still a hell of a long way away from completely removing the human in that exercise of interrogating all the other variables that are contributing to the success of that particular quarter from a pricing point of view.
I think you've hit something really cool there for a software provider, rather than it would be a slightly different conversation but I still think it if it's in the business. But we have to convince people that we're doing a good job, right? And that is much easier if there is a causal chain of events. So this one is quite simple in that we worked out the reason for it afterwards, but basically sell-through's good, adjust the price, sell-through's still good, adjust the price, sell-through's still good. It's very clearly us, and we can explain why and show that with nice graphs. I've no doubt that an ML algorithm would do basically the same thing, but you can't unpick it, because at that point you have stock levels, market information, price, whatever features you're throwing in. And it's really hard to say, well, this is the core reason for it. Which when you're going back and saying, well, we increased the price. Why do you increase the price? The algorithm said to increase the price, we increase the price. When it's working, again, great, happy days, we made you money. If that stops working, it's problematic. Whereas if you've got a rules-based thing, it's like, well, I'll give you a classic example. Why is the price continually going up? Well, your sales are going up. So, well, no, those are our offline sales, not our online sales. Okay, we haven't split the data feed correctly, so we're getting a false positive in the algorithm. That's really easy to unpick in a rules-based system because you can effectively isolate out that characteristic and see where that's gone wrong. But when you're kind of everything becomes interlinked, it becomes much more difficult. That particular phishing one is a bit annoying for me because I've realized I'm effectively price gouging myself. I only realized this after we were talking about it yesterday, but
well, you can know that other suppliers weren't going to get access to stock levels, and therefore, you know, they were no longer going to update.
Yeah, but if people weren't automatically putting the prices up, I wouldn't have to automatically pay more.
Well, the answer to that is to win more phishing companies, and then you can have the pick of the bunch, as in you just
yeah. And then I instigate a race to the bottom, and then I buy all the products. Is that
as I said, these opinions are our own and not the company's. Please do not sue us. So, well, actually, technically, I think I've got insurance, so for that kind of thing. So, but don't sue Rob, right? Okay, he won't like it. Right. So, is there anything else you'd like to say on this particular topic before we get ourselves into trouble?
No, I think it's a really interesting one. I think. I think, quite honestly, depending on the sophistication of your business, all AI is applicable in some way, but the amount of R&D effort and ROI varies dramatically depending on who you are, and I think that's the bit to really think about. And whether you're working with doing it internally or whether an external person or whatever, like most people in the marketplace, ourselves included, have segmented offerings as well. So you may want to test some of it or not, and we find this actually quite a lot, that people start the kind of at the lower end and then step up actually honestly quite rapidly. But it lets you kind of see, okay, well, the automation, that's great, I really like that, that's saving how many hours a week, that's a key benefit. Okay, I'm now using a repricer, I'm keeping up people in the marketplace, and then I'm doing more sophisticated stuff, and that's showing me like the sales stuff, right? That's in our Commander offering, but like you can then actually, as a business owner, isolate it out by doing it stepwise as well. So I will happily admit that for certain businesses, competitor repricing is probably all you need to do, right? Or even competitor tracking is all you need to do, because price changes aren't happening that frequently. Things aren't really price driven, say if you're selling luxury goods or whatever. And really, you just need a lens to make sure everyone else is honest, right? Is everyone selling at the supplier specified price? Is a really good example, right? We all have to sell at this because the supplier tells us we have to sell at this. That's fine. Off we go. Is everyone doing it? Next stage up, okay, I'm just going to do it automatically. But the market is so competitive that actually there isn't really any wiggle room at all, right? Drop shipping is a good example of that, where the products are easily accessible. Everyone's playing with basically from the same one or two suppliers. There's no kind of edge in terms of logistics. So you're just in brand, build your brand, automate your pricing, who cares? And then you step up and step up and step up. And there'll be a point on that where you fit in, right? And the good suppliers will have some kind of split up automatically. And then we'll be able to drill into that even further, right? Especially as you get to the more kind of enterprisey end. It's like, okay, well, you want this bit here, but maybe you need sales rules. Maybe you don't need sales rules, but maybe you need marketing rules, because that's actually the key thing. Or maybe you need click-through rate or weather patterns or seasonality or whatever. So I think I'd really say that I think you said it really well. Just don't go through this checklist, Like work out what your business needs, and then kind of baby steps, scientific method, right? Try A. What's the returns from A? Try B. What's the returns from B? Try C. What's the returns from C? And you will reach a point where you hit quite a sharp, I think, diminishing return curve. And there may be like a nirvana above it, but you may never be able to get there because of the ROI, because of the amount of effort required.
Yeah, I think that's a very good. I wouldn't say summary, but I think that's very good sort of conclusion at the end for today's topic. I mean, if I'm hearing it rightly, AI doesn't necessarily have to be an all singing, all dancing. You need a PhD to understand it. Only Rob can understand it. It doesn't need to be. Doesn't need to be that kind of level.
I didn't tell my PhD story, so I didn't do a PhD in machine learning until 2 years after I finished my PhD, and the field I got rebranded as machine learning.
So what was it originally then?
It was so part of the research was like Bayesian statistics, which it's all about kind of confidence levels and things and how well you can predict stuff. Garbling it really. It's been years, but at the time I was just using some kind of quite niche algorithm and applying it to condensed matter systems, so trying to work out when metals melted, because information theory and statistical mechanics are basically the same. And then I was chatting to my housemate a couple of years later, and he said, "Oh, but I've just seen you spent a lot of time on this, didn't you? Yeah, it's the new hot topic in ML." I was like, all right, good luck to them.
Clearly some marketer comes along and said, we need to make this sexier. So let's...
There is more truth in that than you'd think, in that, oh God, we need some grant money. Let's call it ML. Let's put money at ML.
And no comment when I was raising money for BlackCurve as to what buzzword bingo you need, and it's not just us. I think every deck that investors see has got AI and ML written in it. But yeah, I mean, so just to wrap up, so AI doesn't have to be all singing, all dancing, complicated mathematics. I think for me, and certainly sounds like you, Rob, simple automation through basic algorithms is a form of artificial intelligence, and your stage of your business will reflect how far or how deep your pockets are to be able to get the benefits of that. But there, as you say, there is certainly from a pricing point of view, kind of diminishing returns, and also just simply even the big boys that have been doing it for decades and decades, a lot of them don't even have the data sets to make full use of all singing, all dancing kind of predictive analytics. So do not underestimate the power of a reasonably smart rules-based engine. There we go. So does that sound all right to you, Rob?
Yeah, sure, why
not? So we have been BlackCurve. This is our podcast, eCommerce Matters, available on all major podcasting platforms. So do hit subscribe now, and your phones or wherever you listen to it will be automatically updated with our dulcet tones. We look forward to welcoming you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.